Hey guys, how are you? So I wanted to talk about something, and that's from my personal experience. And this may not apply to everyone, but for those that it resonate with, like you'll know that it's for you. So yeah, it might not apply to everyone. Um, and it has to do with, feeling just the feeling of not being at the right place. And I'll explain what I mean. Of course, we should always not favor, but that should be our priority to be working on ourselves because we get into situations, we get triggered, and it's important to know why we're getting triggered. What is that the root cause of that? Most of the time, especially as adults, we get into patterns, we repeat patterns, we get into cycles, and we try and resolve that situation, but oftentimes it stems from childhood, right? There's a deeper issue that we didn't address. Um, so that is first, what we should be addressing. So because everything begins with us, and I totally agree with that. The self work, nothing replaces inner work, self work. Um, but I'm talking about the cases where you feel you've grown, you've learned enough to be able to move forward, and you feel like you have that fire to kind of propel you forward, but you find yourself in an environment or a circumstance where you feel like no matter what you do, you just keep going in circles. And no matter who you talk to, it's almost like you can predict the outcome. And it's not to say it's good or bad, it's just everything becomes very predictable. And it's kind of, you develop this feeling of, you know, let's take the analogy of water, like of water from a river flowing into the ocean. Water is supposed to be fluid. So, what happens if you block that water? Well, it becomes stagnant, right? And it starts accumulating stuff. It can get muddy, it can get dirty. So, you kind of start getting the feeling of it's not, why am I not moving forward? And it's not to say that you're perfect and you don't have anything else to work on, but it's almost like you've done enough work to know that you should be moving forward simply, and that doesn't happen. um, well, and a lot of people will hesitate to consider that option, but those that do consider it, I find usually that's what ends up being the solution, and that option is to change environments totally, just change. And I'm not just talking about job, it can be just in an aspect of your life, just a change of job or leaving a relationship, which in itself is a huge deal. It's a big change. um but sometimes it's like the need for a clean slate. And again, that's not for everyone, but for those that it is for, you'll know what I'm talking about. That feeling. Um, I wanted to talk about it because I was just taking my plants inside, and it reminded me of that saying of, if a flower doesn't grow, what do? You change its soil, you give it more sun, you change its environment so it can flourish. And again, as I'm saying, like as I say, it's not to say that inner work is not, you should discard that, because then you can get into that, cycle of avoidance and running away from things that trigger you. So here we're not talking about running away. We're talking about just, you're at peace. You're actually at peace. You're at peace and getting bored, and so bored that you're actually getting frustrated. That's what I'm talking about. And usually it's more than one, it's in more than just one aspect in your life. It's going to happen in several areas of your life. You'll feel this way perhaps in your relationship, in your work for sure. Usually that's what happens. And just in your, everyday life, and the people that you talk to, the friends, the acquaintances that you have. It'll feel like, they seem to be okay. They seem to be moving forward. They're happy, if we can say. But you'll feel like, why don't I feel this way? Things seem to be okay, but that okay isn't enough. So yeah, the analogy of the flower, where you change its soil, you give it sun, you change its location, and all of a sudden it flourishes. Same goes for us, right? If we're at that point where we have everything inside us and we're just waiting to bloom and we just can't seem to be blooming, then what's needed is an environment change most of the time. Like what would happen if you looked at that flower that's not growing anymore, and you just kept looking at it wondering, why isn't it growing? Like, why aren't you growing? Why isn't it working? And it's funny because this is what we do with people. Well, with ourselves actually, right? Like, why am I not moving forward? Why is this not working? And if you feel like you've done everything you need to do and you're at peace with, whatever resolutions, solutions came out of your work, the work you did in yourself, if you find that, okay, things they are resolved, but it's not enough. Like, really, this is, okay, so this is it. Then there's a need to change the environment. So, yeah, that's what I wanted to share.